Hello, everyone. Today's date is April 16, 2023. We have a Israeli-Palestinian Confederation simulation with Professor Oren Yiftachel. We are proposing the creation of a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine, a secular democratic government for the entire population in Israel and Palestine that includes Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem, and Israel, 14 million people. A separate and independent government, separate from the Israeli government and the Palestinian government, independent of the Israeli and the Palestinian government. A government that will be elected based on common election for all the 14 million people, excluding, of course, minors, but based on equality, based on democracy, a secular government. But so that it is clear, we are not proposing the dismantling of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We are proposing the creation of a separate, independent, third common government for all the people in Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, Israel, Palestine. My name is Joseph Abisar. You could reach me by sending me email to josephAbisar@gmail.com. We have a website. The website is in 3 languages, Arabic, Hebrew, and English. If you go to the website, you can read the Constitution and the frequently asked questions. You could read the Constitution in full. We have a full Constitution, an existing Constitution for a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine. The Constitution spells out the three branches of government: the legislative branch with 300 parliament members, Palestinians and Israelis together, who will pass legislation together, an executive branch, Palestinians and Israeli, one Palestinian, one Israeli, rotating in 2 years, and a judicial branch with Palestinian and judges together, deciding issues that have to do with laws that the common government passes. The Constitution spells out how the elections will take place and what would be the relationship between the common government that we are proposing and the existing Israeli and Palestinian government. You could also get a better explanation or a more detailed explanation if you read the frequently asked questions. It's a very interesting read. We are going to propose parts of really an explanation of the Constitution, but if you want to read the whole Constitution, it's better to go to our website. The Constitution is in 3 languages. Today we have Professor Oren Yiftachel, who will speak at our simulation. Professor Oren Yiftachel teaches political and legal geography at Ben-Gurion University. That's in the Negev, it's in the south of Israel. He served as the chairman of B'Tselem, the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights in the occupied territories. He's one of the founders of Land for All, a group of Jews and Palestinians who believe in reconciliation based on equal national and individual rights through an Israeli-Palestinian confederation. Their vision is different than ours, but they also believe in an Israeli-Palestinian confederation. In 2021, Professor Yiftachel published the book, Power and Land from Ethnocracy to Creeping Apartheid. We are going to have more simulations. We have simulations almost every 2 weeks. Our next simulation is on April 30th with a Palestinian and Israeli. They're both Palestinian American and Israeli American, Sam Bahor and Bernard Avishai. They wrote an op-ed in the New York Times supporting a confederation, but their vision is totally different than ours. I met with both of them. I interviewed both of them. Sam Bahor's vision is, he accepts our vision almost in totality. Bernard Avishai does not. It should be very interesting, but they are kind of like a partners, Palestinians and Israelis, and they are exploring visions for peace. On May 14, we're going to have Dr. Bennett Romberg, who is an international relations expert, and is recognized as a nuclear weapon proliferation and terrorism expert. And we should have a very interesting conversation with him, especially since the nuclear issue has become so important in that region in the last several years. We will have on May 28th, Professor Shlomo Zand. I was told that that's how we pronounce his name, Zand. He is a professor of history from the University of Tel Aviv, or Tel Aviv University. On June 11, we will be on vacation, so we will not have a simulation. And on June 25th, we will have Yoram Perry, who is a former political advisor to the late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and he is the former editor-in-chief of the Israeli daily Davar. And that, at the time, was almost equivalent to Haaretz. And it was a very popular paper in Israel. I'd like to show you a list of previous participants. We had many. Noam Chomsky participated twice, and he recorded a video supporting the IPC concept because he believes that this is the most realistic concept for peace. Also, I'd like to show you a list of people who did not accept our invitation. We send them many invitations. They either, most really did not even reply. Some, very few replied and declined, but most of the people that you see on the list did not even reply. And we hope to be able to get them to speak in the future because they all are interested in the conflict and they all are interested in peace. And we are asking them to stress test our formula for peace. The estimated time for the simulation is 120 minutes. We will have segments. Each segment takes about 5 to 7 minutes. And after each segment, we will have a conversation with Professor Yiftachel or with Oren. And then we will have an audience question and answer and closing remarks. We have a video that explains our vision for peace, and I'd like to play it. It's a 2-minute video, but it explains it very well.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians has endured for generations. And instead of time healing the wounds, it's only caused the anger to fester and the violence to grow. But what if there was a way to alleviate the tension? something that may not outright solve every problem, but at least create a forum that encourages a peaceful compromise. Welcome to the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, a common third government between the Israeli and Palestinian citizens, specifically designed to foster peace, tolerance, and economic prosperity between the two nations. Here's how it works. First off, both Israel and Palestine will keep their respective governments. Israel's Knesset and the Palestinian National Authority will remain unchanged. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation, IPC, will be a third entity acting as a unifying agent between the two. The IPC will comprise 300 parliament members elected from 300 districts in Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. Above them will preside a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian. In order for the IPC to pass a law, it will require a 55% majority from its Israeli representatives, as well as a 55% majority from its Palestinian representatives, thereby preventing either side from monopolizing the legislature. Of course, the IPC won't undermine the political power of either the Israeli or the Palestinian government. At any time, Israel or Palestine may veto a law passed by the IPC. If neither side vetoes, the law is passed. And the two nations are another step closer to resolution. Please help us make this a reality. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. We might speak different languages, but we all mean the same thing.
So we are simulating today what we just saw in the video. I would like to, conduct a pre-simulation survey and ask you to vote at this time. Do you support a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine? We will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation today. So please vote, all of you, if you can, on this survey question. Do you support a common government? Okay, 2 more seconds to vote. See more people voting. Okay, can you publish the votes? 28 out of 32 voted yes. That's 88% yes. And 4 out of 32 voted no. That's 13% voted no. And we will conduct the same survey at the end of the simulation, see if we changed minds or one way or another. So that you know, most of the people, or a large number of people who are participating now have participated before. So I'm not surprised to see the high number of yes. It doesn't mean that the Israeli and Palestinian society will accept that formula in the same ratio. But it would have been nice, but I don't think it's realistic for the general population in Israel, Palestine. Our purpose is to show how the common government could make peace between these Israelis and the Palestinian and its neighbors. In my opinion, it can make peace not only with the Israelis and the Palestinians and the neighbors, but within the Israeli internal society and the Palestinian internal society, where we see that they are not living in peace. We are not anti-Israel or anti-Palestinians. We are pro-peace. Professor Oren Yiftachel is not a representative of the IPC. He was invited to stress test the IPC, but he's not speaking on behalf of the IPC. We are pro-peace. We follow our own narrative. We expect that the common government will follow its own narrative. In other words, it's not going to be a mirror of the Israeli government or the Palestinian government. It's going to have a vision, a large vision of the whole area for the purpose of making peace, for the purpose of benefiting the 14 million people in Israel, Palestine. We expect to have a rigorous discussion but we wanted to be respectful. We do not preclude other formulas for peace. We believe that the IPC formula is the best formula, and it can facilitate other formulas if other formulas are necessary. If the parliament decides to adopt any other formulas, they are free to do so. We're really not proposing any substantive proposal. We are proposing a system to make peace. And we are not claiming to be the exclusive organization or our formula to be the exclusively for the only formula for peace. We will ask Professor Yiftachel, Oren, to judge our plan based on these criteria. Could the IPC formula make peace? Is the IPC plan implementable? We make it happen. Is it possible to make it happen? And is there a downside for either the Israeli or the Palestinians if it is implemented? However, we ask you and Oren not to judge us based on perfection. We already recognize, we already admit that we can never reach perfection, and we are not claiming to be perfect. We're asking Oren to judge our plan based on the alternative. Because if you try to find a defect in our plan, if you try to show that it's not perfect, don't waste your time. We already know it's not perfect. The moment you accept the Constitution, you already acknowledge your willingness to accept an imperfect plan. But we are asking you, please judge us based on the alternative, not based on perfection. Perfection is the enemy of good. We basically trying to show legislations that neither the Israeli nor the Palestinian government could veto, because it would benefit the people, their people. That's what we are trying to show. We have many legislations that we can show, but we are limited by time. And what we are showing today is the tip of the iceberg. We ask you to look at the big picture, avoid technical argument, refrain from comments. We encourage you from asking questions. We encourage you to ask questions. I'm sorry, just so that it's clear. We are asking you to ask questions, but we are asking you to refrain from comments. This is a simulation. It's not a lecture. A lecture is an educational talk to an audience, especially to students in a university or college. This is a simulation. A simulation is a model that mimics the operation of an existing or proposed system. We are trying to mimic the operation of a proposed peace, proposed common government. So keep that in mind, and therefore, wait with your comments until the end. You can put your comments in the chat, but do not, please respect our process and keep your comments to the end. So what's the difference between a question and a comment? I show you a picture of a plane and you say, Joseph, how does this plane fly? That's a question. That's a legitimate question. But if you say, Joseph, I will never fly an airplane, or airplanes cause pollution, that's a comment, which is fine, but keep the comments to the end or put them in your chat, because we are asking you to respect the process of a simulation that we are going through. For the purpose of the simulation, you need to accept certain facts and make certain assumptions. These are the facts that you will have to accept. Remember, this is a simulation, that the Israeli prime minister represents Israelis only, because he's elected by Israelis. Palestinian leaders represent Palestinians only. These are facts that we want you to accept as facts. I don't think you'll have a problem accepting those. However, because this is a simulation, we want you to assume certain assumptions, to make certain assumptions. That we just concluded an online election, meaning on the internet, that lasted 3 months. That the election allowed 14 million people to vote, of course, excluding minors. We want you to assume that 5 million people voted, 3 million Palestinian voted, and 2 million Israeli voted. We want you to assume that the president received 1.5 million votes. That me, Joseph, I was elected as president. It makes it easier for me to demonstrate this simulation if I am the president, so that you know I am not ever planning to run for president. I'm not even qualified under the Constitution to be president of the common government. So it just that makes it easier for me to facilitate this simulation. I want you to assume that 1.3 million voted for the vice president, a Palestinian lady, and we will rotate in 2 years. I will become vice president, she will become president, but each of us has constitutional duties. I want you to assume that 300 parliament members were elected. Each parliament member represents a district. So we have 300 districts, and each district has 47,000 people. These are the assumptions that I am asking you to assume for the purpose of the simulation. They are essential for the simulation. So I am going to ask Oren and all of you right now, do you have any questions regarding the assumptions? Or are you not willing to accept those assumptions? Oren?
Well, good evening, everybody. Masai al-Khair, Erev Tov. I had a preparatory meeting with Joseph Avisar, so I was filled up on the process, and I'm very happy to participate. The assumptions, we will comment on some of the detail as they come up, but overall, I agree to go along with this stimulation.
Well, I'm asking you, do you have any reservations that those assumptions are achievable based on what I presented to you?
Well, whether they're achievable, of course, we have some reservations. I mean, the situation on the ground, the political situation, the regime that has developed over the land of Israel-Palestine is very much opposing to this template of peace, regretfully. So I have reservation whether they would be implementable, but I'm willing to try and promote it.
Okay, look, I'm showing you these assumptions, okay? You tell me what assumptions here are not, we cannot achieve, are not achievable. Which of those?
I have a question.
Well,
hold on a second, yeah.
Each one of them, many of them are problematic. For example, the Israeli Prime Minister represents Israelis.
I'm talking about the assumptions, Oren. Yes.
Well, that's what I have, facts. Okay, facts and assumptions. So what's the separation between facts and assumptions?
I am asking you, do you believe that it's not possible to hold online election for 3 months?
No, I think that's possible.
Okay. Do you believe that it is possible to conduct an election and to allow the people of Israel and Palestine to vote online?
No, I think that's possible.
Okay. Do do you believe that if we hold an election for 3 months and we have total awareness of it, do you believe that the assumption that 5 million people voted, do you think that's unrealistic?
I would like to add to the previous assumption that it's also a nice idea. Not only that it's possible, that it's a nice idea to bypass a system that is deadlocked.
Okay.
But whether 5 million people will vote, I think that's very optimistic.
Okay.
Of course, we don't have a crystal ball, but it's very optimistic.
Okay. Someone had a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, Troy.
Okay. I have a couple questions on. First, did you think about the electoral body? Because if there are 14 million people, that's everybody, including babies and so forth. Can you specify, if not now, another time, what is at what age, people can vote? Because in different
18.
countries, different. Okay. Can in the future, can you specify that? And also, can you specify, based on that, how many are the electoral body? Because I don't know.
What do you mean, how many in the electoral body?
Well, because 14 million people is everybody, but if you take
away. Oh, you mean? Okay. What is your question? What is your question?
That's my question. The size of the electorate. If you can simply specify it later, because with 5 million, that's one question. Another question is for the districts or just the way of election. Is it a so-called majority first past the post? Is it a proportional list? That's important to specify.
We created 300 districts. Each district is 47,000 people. Whoever gets the majority of votes for parliament in that district become the parliament member.
Okay, but then is it a simple majority, or if you have, let's say, 3 people who are running?
Yes, whoever gets the most votes from that district is the parliament member.
Okay, so that's important to specify because, in many.
I'm asking for questions, not comments.
That is the question.
No, it's not. It's okay. Let's go on.
I asked the question, what is the way of election?
I told you that, okay?
Okay.
We believe these assumptions are achievable with small financial commitment. Just the estimated war between Gaza and Israel is over $100 million per day. With $100 million a day, these assumptions are achievable, in my opinion. We're asking you to become volunteers in these simulations. We need volunteers for Israeli prime ministers,
I'm willing.
and Hamas leader. Do I have a volunteer for Israeli prime minister?
Yes, Len.
Okay, hi, Len. Okay. Do we have a volunteer for PA leader? PA leader. I need a volunteer for PA leader. That's Palestinian Authority. And I need a volunteer for Hamas leader.
I would do the PA, but I have to leave early at 10:15, so probably be better if somebody else did it.
Okay, do I have a better PA leader?
I have the same issue. I have to leave early, so I can't commit.
Okay, do I have a better PA?
I'll do it.
Sorry.
Okay, Libby will be, okay. I need a Hamas leader. Do I have a Hamas leader?
Yes.
Shlomo, okay, terrific. Okay. The rest of you will be parliament members. I'm asking you to choose now whether you want to be, you are a Palestinian parliament member or Israeli parliament member. You need to be intellectually honest throughout the simulation and commit yourself to either Israeli or Palestinian. You'll have to, and I may ask you what district you represent during the simulation. So here is a map
Just
that helps you decide
what
district you are representing. And let's do a test now. Let's have
Joseph, one moment. One moment, Joseph. I see that Tarek is here and Sean is here, and they are more qualified than I am to be Hamas leaders.
Okay, who else? Who is that?
So this is Shlomo, and I would transfer it to Sean or to Tarek.
Okay, Tarek is leaving. Sean, are you willing to be a Hamas leader?
I can try. I'm
Okay.
not the greatest, but I'll try. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So let's have just a test. Palestinian parliament members, just vote now so we know how many we have. Just vote yes now so we know how many Palestinian parliament members. Okay. Okay. One more second, please vote. Publish the vote. We have 13 Palestinian parliament members. And let's have the Israeli parliament members vote. Okay, publish the vote. We have 10 Israeli. Oren, did you choose to be a parliament member or you're just observer?
No, I'll be an observer to keep my neutrality.
Okay. All right. First order of business is our Constitution. We need to pass the Constitution. You be kind enough to read the Constitution.
You're asking me, right?
Yes, Libby.
Okay, sure. We believe that Palestinians and Israelis are entitled to equal rights under the law and guaranteed human rights and freedom. The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation does not intend to supersede or supplant the Palestinian or Israeli governments, nor to abrogate or undermine any agreements between those governments. We recognize the need to work with the Israeli and Palestinian governments. Our purpose is to resolve conflicts and to expand the relationship between Palestinians and Israelis in a fair and equitable manner. We believe in equal rights under the law, guaranteed human rights, and freedom for all. We voluntarily give the legislatures and the governments of Israel and Palestine veto power over legislation we pass relating to the domain of control of those governments. We believe in the separation of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. We believe in the creation of a permanent secular government for all the people residing in Israel and Palestine. We believe in having a separate judicial branch relating to the IPC legislation with Israeli and Palestinian judges with a system to avoid biased decisions based on nationality.
Okay, so the important part is that we do not intend to supersede or supplant the current Israeli and Palestinian governments or abrogate or undermine them. They can agree to whatever they want between them, including two-state, one-state, or any other formula. But when we pass legislation that has to do with their domain and control, we give them a veto power. So that's generally what we say in the Constitution. Does anyone have any questions regarding the Constitution? Don?
Yeah, yes. In the preamble of the Constitution, it states that the IPC achieves its goals through a common government of a mutual confederation dedicated to fair representation of the Israeli and Palestinian people.
Right.
goes on to state the IPC Confederation, as Libby read, does not supersede the Palestinian-Israeli government or abrogate agreement between those governments. So my question is, how would that make the IPC a legitimate government? And how can it be legitimate if it's recognizing the power of the existing governments? And what if they, which would be in the current climate, I would imagine, are vetoing virtually any equitable solution that the IPC may come up with?
Okay, our legitimacy is from the election. As you can see from the assumptions, we allowed 14 million people, excluding minors, to vote. And we were elected by 5 million people. So we are the only legitimate government in Israel, Palestine, because we are the only government that was elected by the people of Israel, Palestine. Now, regarding your second question, how does it make us legitimate or illegitimate if we recognize the legitimacy of the Israeli or the Palestinian government? We do not ever state that we are recognizing the legitimacy of the Israeli or the Palestinian government. We recognize their power. There is a big difference. We recognize that in order for us to function, we have to recognize their power, but we do not recognize their legitimacy. Any other questions? Oren, do you have any comments?
Well, again, it's an innovative, and I commend you for the group for this innovative idea to try and break a deadlock. However, there is, there are conventions and there are rules to international laws, to sovereignty, to international agreement, and there is no precedent in my long experience of human rights work and international comparisons to have a government above a government without the consent and without the allocation of powers by those governments to a special governing body above them, so to speak, like the European Union, say, or Bosnia or places like this. So question mark hangs over the possibility and the legitimacy because the resolution of Palestine, the peace that we all want to achieve Palestine, is supposed to be within the framework of international law. And what you are proposing is outside the framework of international law. I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but just how difficult and what kind of obstacles, and not only on the ground, but in terms of legitimacy of this path that you're taking, even within the small community that supports peace.
Okay, first of all, we are not above, and we're not claiming to be above. In fact, we give the Israeli and the Palestinian government veto power over our legislation. So we are not above them, and we are not claiming to be above them. And with regard to international law recognizes democracies that are elected by the people. We are the only democracy in Israel, Palestine, that is elected by the people. And it is really curious that you would bring up international law when both Israel and the Palestinian government reject and violate international law all the time. So why would that subject come up when it comes to peace?
Well, of course, what I stress is that the peace vision, not the current situation. The current situation, we're moving into apartheid, which of course is a total grave violation of international law. And
so why did you bring up international law?
Because it's not the reality. I'm saying the vision for peace is within international law, especially Palestine. All the campaign over the last 55 years is to have international law in force in Israel, Palestine. whether it's to do with the right of return, whether it's to do with sovereignty, whether it's to do with Israeli settlements, whether it's to do with Jerusalem. All the claim is to return or to impose international law, which rightly, so you say, that Israel rejects. So in that, I want to put a question to the audience, the innovative idea, and I stress it, it's an innovative idea to try and bypass the system that is totally locked into its own contradictions, whether being outside the norm of international law is a smart move, because it will encounter incredible resistance, even from the peace camp. The second thing is that you said, Joseph, is about power and legitimacy. There is a big question about, of course, the Israeli government has no legitimacy to control the Palestinian territory. This is, again, a violation of international law, grave one, over 55 years, especially against the Geneva Convention, the Hague Convention, etc. So while Israel has a legitimacy to have a government, absolutely, but not beyond its border. So it's partial legitimacy. Now you talk about recognition and power. You recognize the power of the Palestinian government that has no power, right? And the Palestinian government at the moment has very little power. So just to put that on the table, that we recognize those governments, there's quite a few caveats around it.
We recognize their power in terms of our ability to function. We don't recognize their power to praise them. We recognize their power in terms of our practicality. But any other question before we take a ratify the Constitution?
Yes, yes.
Questions, Len, not yes. Comments.
Question to Oren.
No, I'm sorry. Question about the Constitution. You have questions?
Okay, fine.
Okay.
I'll pass.
Okay, does anyone have questions about the Constitution? This is a simulation. It's not a lecture. Please ask, because I see a hand raised. I have three raised their hand. I don't see.
Okay, I'll call them. Charles is first.
Okay, Charles, what is your question?
You're muted.
Okay. Could you explain why having a constitution is necessary? What advantages it gives to the ability to establish policy?
Well, a constitution is necessary so that the people of Israel and Palestine understand what are the rules of the games. So that everything is clear. When you have an honest democracy, and when you are claiming to be passing legislation, they have to be limited by a constitution. So you don't change the rules during the game. And the Constitution basically tells the people of Israel and Palestine, these are the rules of the games. And the Constitution brings more trust to the government. If you don't have Constitution, the people will not trust the government, because the government can change the rules during the game.
Because for the first time, the rules are the same for everybody, both Israelis and Palestinians.
Exactly. Any other questions?
Okay, Shlomo is next. He has a question.
So very quickly, so just referring to what Don asked, what if the Israeli government doesn't agree with any of our decision, nothing. They either disregard us or
that's not a question about the Constitution. That's your opinion. So if I can't, I can't talk.
Wait. No,
I'm asking a question.
The Israeli government may decide to ignore. It will have to pay political price internationally and within the people of Israel and Palestine if they choose to ignore. Any other question?
Yeah, Don has his hand up again.
Yes, I had a question about the drawing of the districts. It's stated that it's based on population or geographic location. And my question is, for instance, the Palestinian districts, is that solely within the West Bank and Gaza? I'm not clear on the determination of an Israeli or Palestinian district.
There are no Israeli or Palestinian districts.
We have Palestinian or Israeli representatives. Am I misunderstanding that?
Right, that's different from district.
Okay.
You can have many of the districts will be mixed districts, okay? An Israeli could vote for a Palestinian and a Palestinian could vote for Israel. It just so happened that in some areas, you will have all of the population Palestinian or all the population Israeli. But many areas will be mixed areas, but we do not have district based on Palestinian or Israeli district.
Okay, so follow-up question. I'm premising that I'm a representative from Jaffa as an Israeli.
Yeah, then you're Israeli and you're a district.
I don't live there. That's a mixed population area. So would that be?
No, it's not mixed. It's Israeli. Israelis, they may be Palestinians there, but are you Israeli or are you Palestinian?
Well, Israeli, a citizen. So that's my question. So if you're in Israel proper, it would be an Israeli district. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, when you ran for the parliament, what did you declare yourself to be? Israeli?
I'll say I was Israeli, but I might have been running against a Palestinian in that district.
And you were elected, so you're an Israeli parliament member. You declared yourself to be Israeli when you ran. People voted for you as Israeli. Now you're Israeli. And
if I had declared myself hypothetically as Palestinian, or the Palestinian candidate won over me, would it be a Palestinian district?
Okay. The district is not Israeli or Palestinian. The district is
a representative. I misphrased that again.
Okay. If you are an Israeli citizen and you misrepresented your identity and you said you are Palestinian and you are elected as Palestinian, then you may be impeached by the parliament.
Okay. One more question. I don't want to take up too much time. If I'm an Israeli citizen who is of Palestinian heritage living in Jaffa, but I'm an Israeli citizen.
Your heritage is meaningless.
So then it's Israeli.
Joseph, I think you've misunderstood his question. Joseph, you've misunderstood the question on the part of the gentleman who's speaking to you. I understand his question. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead. I'll leave you if you want to try to.
Well,
I am saying it really depends on what you declared yourself to be. Okay? If you declare yourself to be a Palestinian parliament candidate from Tel Aviv, then that would be your designation, but you may be impeached because you are not a Palestinian citizen. Let's take a vote on the ratification of the Constitution. Palestinian parliament members, please vote. Do you ratify the Constitution? Okay. Okay, publish the vote. Is this being published? Yeah. Okay, so 81% voted to ratify the Constitution. 3 voted no. So the 3 that voted no are expelled from the parliament because you are not willing to accept the Constitution. So you are now expelled from the parliament. You cannot vote on any legislation. And the person who received the second number of votes from your district will be the parliament members. You are not allowed to vote. Okay, let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Israeli parliament members. Dan, I don't see the the vote. Maybe it's not appearing on my. Okay. 80 published the vote. 82, so 2 Israeli parliament members voted no. So you are expelled from the Constitution and from the parliament, just like the Palestinians, and you are not allowed to vote because just like in any other a democracy in the world, parliament or Congress people need to accept the Constitution. If you're not accepting the Constitution, you basically are the Constitution. You are not allowed to vote. You cannot be part of the parliament. Okay, let's.
Joseph, can the Palestinian ones vote again because they didn't know what the consequence would be?
Okay, so yes, sure. Let's start voting again.
But please, I have a question for clarification.
What's the question?
I think that when you say that people are expelled, I think that there are really 2 questions.
What is the question, Troy? Troy, what is the question?
The question is, normally, if you don't vote for a constitution, you still have to obey the Constitution as a citizen, and you're not expelled.
No, they're not citizens. They're parliament members. Okay.
But once you're a parliament member,
you have to swear allegiance. You have to swear allegiance to the Constitution.
You're not allowed to serve if you don't accept. If you don't
let's take over the vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote again. Palestinian parliament member, do you ratify the Constitution? Okay, publish the vote. Okay, 1 person voted no. He is expelled, whoever it is. You are expelled from the parliament. You are not allowed to vote. And 91% that voted yes, you are part of the parliament. You are allowed to vote. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Although the Israeli parliament members should not have a second vote because they already understood the consequences. So we're not going to have another vote for the Israeli parliament members. They understood the consequences because they saw the Palestinian parliament members being expelled, and they voted. So they are not allowed to vote. Those that voted no. All right.
Joseph, could I just quickly say people are asking about how to raise their hand to ask a question. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little icon that says reactions. And if you click on reactions, you can raise your hand.
Okay, so let me just respond to some of the comments that came in about, I think from Oren. The Israeli and the Palestinian government do not have a reason to object. They don't have any legitimate reason to object because they are not, they haven't been giving peace to the Israeli and the Palestinian government, and they would not be able to articulate a reason. Regarding the number of votes that Oren raised, we don't really know. Israelis and Palestinians are not a monolithic system. They do not have, the governments do not have the legal authority to object. They don't have the moral authority, and they may lose legitimacy if they object, and they never attempted to disrupt before. So that you know, we did have an election on 2012. We had a full page ad in the New York Times, not a simulated fact, but a real ad, and the Israeli or the Palestinian governments did not try to object. And we did hold the elections. They were not a great success, but we did hold the elections, and we did have 300 districts, and the Palestinian and Israeli governments did not attempt to object or disrupt. All right, let's go to the first order of business, and that is granting a veto power to the separate governments. Libby, could you please read the legislation?
The Confederation is the government of the entire population of Israel and Palestine from the river to the sea. We recognize the Palestinian and Israeli governments and are seeking their cooperation to implement our vision for peace by giving them a veto. We will do our utmost to satisfy the essential needs of each government. We are pleading with the Palestinian and Israeli public to understand that while we would like to pass the best legislation possible to improve their lives, under these constraints, a perfect legislation is not possible. We hereby bestow a veto power relating to legislation affecting sovereignty to the following: the government of Israel, the Palestinian Authority, Hamas. In the event of changes in governments, the legislation may be amended or repealed.
All right, does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation? This legislation is not subject to, we do not give a veto power to the Israeli and the Palestinian government because it's internal to us. Oren, do you have any questions regarding this legislation?
So far, it's good.
All right.
I mean, if we go along with the legitimacy of the three governments, and I raised the reservation before that, you know, they have limited legitimacy, but since the whole construction is about existing governments and going besides them, you said not above them, but in parallel to them, I see the logic and I'm going ahead with that.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions before we take a vote? Okay,
one more reservation, perhaps, Joseph. Again, I have to raise international law because these are the rules of the game. Like you want a basketball game, you can only take a step and a half. You cannot take 3 steps, right? You have to have some. So there is a question mark about Hamas too. I know they won the Palestinian election, the parliamentary election, and since 2005 there is no elections anymore for 18 years, and they are declared as a terror organization by many authorities. So there is also a question mark. I know the simulation. I know that they do have effective sovereignty, well, parts of sovereignty of Gaza because Israel controls them as well. But just for the discussion, we have to put that on the protocol, that they are not a legitimate government by taking over Gaza by force. Yes, they won an election, but there's a question mark about their classification, the terror they use, much like Israel is using terror, also Hamas is using terror.
All right, yeah. We are...
Can I respond?
No, we are only... Okay, basically, go ahead, Tariq.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how that we select what's legitimate and what's not. Why is the PA legitimate? Since they didn't have any...
Look, as far as we are concerned, all 3 entities are not legitimate. But as far as we are concerned, they can prevent us from reaching our people in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel. We give them a veto power, not because they are legitimate. It's because they can prevent us from functioning and serving our people. We are the government of the people, Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. And these entities, if we do not give them a veto power, they will oppose us and we will not be able to achieve our goal, which is serving our people. Let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament members, please vote.
I think Shlomo has his hand
up.
Yeah,
I still have one question, very quick one. So what if Israel just vetoes everything? Just veto everything, that means what? What do we do then? Because they have the power to veto. What does it mean now?
They will lose legitimacy if we pass legislation that is acceptable to the people, that is good for the people. We will see to it that they will pay a price if they veto legislation that is in opposition to their people, to our people.
Okay, so it is basically theoretical. They would veto, and then this is their yeah, they would have to pay the price. I agree, but
Right.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I am the president, and I was elected, and I will see to it that they will pay the price, internationally and nationally. Okay. 90% of the Palestinian parliament members share the results. 90% voted yes on this legislation. Let's have the Israeli parliament members please vote. Okay, publish the vote. 80% of the Israeli parliament members voted in favor of this legislation. And so this legislation passed. By the way, these legislations that we are showing you today are all selected by Oren. He selected the legislation that he wants to discuss. And basically, that's what we are doing. We are following what he requested. Can you stop sharing the results, please? It's stuck on my, for some reason. Okay. I think Oren wanted to talk about, so I'm sorry. Okay, so Oren, so now we are actually getting into substantive legislation. Oren wanted to talk about these legislation. I told him that we usually pass 3. He said, well, why don't we try to pass 4, which is very ambitious, and I'm very appreciative. He wanted to talk about removal of the wall, a joint mutual flag, and joint economic zone in Gaza, Israel, Disneyland. That's what we will try to discuss today. That's why I am rushing so much, because we have so much hard work ahead of us to do. Could you read the first legislation?
The Israeli-Palestinian Confederation is calling for the Israeli government to promptly remove the wall, fences, barriers, and all checkpoints scattered across the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas, bestowing upon them a veto power which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, does anyone have questions about the legislation? Hearing no questions, let's have the Palestinian parliament members please vote. Palestinian only parliament members, please vote.
Well,
I don't.
You've got an old thing covering the screen here from veto power.
I'm sorry?
You've got something covering the screen.
I guess so. I don't know what.
You have the veto power. The veto power.
Yeah, you can click it off. Click it off in the corner.
It's not me. I can't do it.
Okay. Can we take the vote? Can we?
Dan, I think
you have to ask Dan.
Len, I think you can. If you hit the close button, it goes away.
Well, we have to see the voting sheet.
Yeah, Joseph, we're not getting that screen to vote.
Me neither. I don't get that.
The problem for Dan. Dan has to give us the voting sheet.
Right now, the voting is not functioning.
Oh, okay, Dan.
I would recommend you just raise your hands and we'll count the hands.
Good idea.
Hey, Joseph.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
About this legislation, it should be like clear that the wall and the barriers are those that are in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Because I think last time it was presented, a lot of people were like, well, how are Israelis going to be safe? But these are the ones that are within the territories, not anything around Israeli territories.
Okay. Then can you try to do the vote again? Okay.
And there are some hands up, Joseph.
Okay, okay, please ask your question.
Olivia?
No, they're not questions. I think
the
they're people
hands
trying to
were
vote.
Oh, they're voting.
They're voting hands. Sorry, Libby.
Okay, so Palestinian parliament members, please say yes or no. Let's hear with the Palestinian parliament. Please say yes.
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 3,
Yes.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6. Okay, any more? Only 6?
I had my hand up, but I saw I'm a yes.
Okay.
And me also, yes. I can't find my.
Just say yes or no.
Yes, yes.
Okay, are there any Palestinian parliament members who vote no on this legislation? Okay, let's go to the Israeli parliament members. Please vote.
Dan, can you take my hand down, Dan? Thank you. I can't take it down.
Joseph, I have a suggestion. Why don't you just reverse the question? Are there any objections? It might be easier for the vote.
Yeah, okay. Any Israeli parliament members who object to this legislation? Okay, I hear no objections. So that means it passed both. Let's go to the Hamas leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the PA leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No.
Let's go to the Israeli prime minister. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any way we can amend the legislation?
Yes, I think you're putting the cart before the horse. The first thing we have to do is dismantle all the terrorist organizations, such as Hamas,
okay, we are not able to do that. Anyway.
Well, then fine. Then there's nothing you can do. I'm not removing these things as long as you keep the terrorists in place. I'm sorry.
Okay, we are the common.
You can be as common as you want, but yeah. I'm not committing suicide because you have some European Union aspirations. I agree with the European Union aspect, but we're not committing suicide.
Okay.
As long as there are terrorist organizations, you cannot expect this. You cannot ask for this.
Okay. Any way we can discuss the future or very close future discussion to remove the wall or to remove it incrementally?
No, first you have to end terrorism, Islamic terrorism. Then we can remove the walls.
Are you saying that the removal of the wall would be strictly within the decision of your government?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think if I may, this defeats the purpose of this because a lot of people could say the same thing about Israel. So right now we're trying to find a resolution, not to pick.
The resolution is to stop handing out candies when 28 bullets were pumped into a mother and her 2 teenage daughters. And you gave out candy.
Oren, can we hear your comments regarding this legislation?
Well, okay. First of all, I want to elaborate in 2 or 3 minutes that I'm sitting here as a representative of a confederation movement in Israel-Palestine. And this is overall, I'm really looking for cooperation, for interchange of ideas, for promoting the idea of confederation for Israel-Palestine. And I'm very glad that there is a group in the United States that, while we're not identical, would like to promote this idea of 2 nations with the self-determination for these nations, as well as overarching bodies and some joint institutions and management of the territory.
Oren, could you please comment regarding this legislation, this specific legislation?
Yeah, but this is an important framing, and so in terms of the idea of a confederation that we promote, and
Oren, that's really not part of the discussion at this time. We will have question and answer, and you can promote, but we want to
later on. Okay, later on, because I'd like to.
Yes, you'll have plenty of time to talk about your organization.
Okay, so in terms of the legislation itself, I support it. The idea of an open homeland, open movement, is an absolute essential foundation of peace and reconciliation. I do take seriously the idea of disarming terrorist groups, and that includes the Israeli settlers. So the Israeli Prime Minister, I can't recall the name now, has a point. So we can make.
Okay, but let me ask you this:
we can amend this. We can amend this legislation. We can amend this legislation by adding a clause about the wall must fall following the disarmament of terrorist groups, Jewish and Palestinian.
Would that be acceptable to you, Mr. Prime Minister?
Well, there are very few Jewish terrorists and a lot of Islamic terrorists.
Oh my God.
So you want to add that sentence, you may, but that's fine. That just tells me that Hamas is going to be disarmed.
All right.
And I'll go along with that.
The IDF is seen to be a terrorist organization by many Palestinians.
Okay. Joseph.
Well, that's wrong. That's wrong.
All right, let's go on and move to the next legislation.
Okay, Joseph, can I just, can we add something also? If the Israeli Prime Minister wants a wall, then build it on Israeli territory around Israeli towns. But you're building these walls in between Palestinian cities and Palestinians.
So let me tell you one thing. All of Israel, from the river to the sea, according to Article 80 of the UN Charter, says is the Jewish homeland. There is no Palestinian territory. It will be a Palestinian territory when Israel and the Palestinian Authority
let's
makes
go
peace.
to the next. Let's go to the next legislation, and that's a mutual flag.
There are two hands
Joseph,
up.
can I make a legal correction, please?
I'm sorry?
Can I make a legal correction?
A legal correction, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, somebody just quoted the UN Charter and actually misquoted it profusely. There is no such reference in the UN Charter, and the United Nations recognizes both states and has done so since 47.
Well,
check the charter. You don't need to believe me. Just check the charter for yourself. There is no such statement. Secondly, the wall, you're presuming that the wall is about security, when there are many in the world, not just in Palestine, that believe the wall is about annexation of territory. So let's not immediately assume that the wall is about security of Israel, which nobody
I think that's a very good point.
wants security.
We're having
for
a
all
discussion here,
in
and
Israel.
you're wrong, and you say I'm wrong. But
you can read the charter. It's a fact. You don't need to believe me,
the
sir.
charter, and you've read propaganda.
Read the charter and check for
you
yourself. You don't need to believe me.
Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next legislation.
Joseph, Mona has her hand up. I don't know if it's a question or not.
Questions only. Questions only. Questions only. Please.
Well, a short clarification. The person that talked about the illegality of the wall is absolutely right. The wall was declared by the ICJ, International Court of Justice, to be illegal. Israel has to dismantle it. So, of course, it is also inside the West Bank, most of it. Some of it is on the Green Line, most of it inside the Green Line, which adds salt to injury. So our parliament here is actually ratifying the international law and the ICJ decision that the wall must go down. Again, with the caveats that Israelis should be safe as well.
All right. Let's go to the next legislation. Just so that you're right, Oren, our parliament accepted this legislation. It's just that the Israeli Prime Minister exercises veto power. The next legislation is mutual flag. Libby, could you please read the legislation?
A flag representing a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine. Israel will continue to fly its flag, and Palestine will continue to fly its flag. And the description is that there are two large trees with strong visible roots, representing life and the connection of both people to the land surrounded by a blue and green circle representing union between the Israeli and Palestinian people.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the flag? Hearing no question, can we see if the voting mechanism works now? Are there any Palestinian parliament members who oppose the mutual flag? Are there any Israeli parliament members who oppose the mutual flag? Okay, no opposition. The Israeli and the Palestinian governments do not have a veto power over this legislation, so this legislation has passed, and this is the flag of the common government. Joint economic zone. Libby, could you please read this legislation?
The Joint Economic Zone, JEZ, between Israel and Gaza. Exclusive IPC management and control. Common economy. Education, industry, agriculture, sewer treatment, desalination plants, solar farms, wind power, and green energy. International airport and seaport. Equally accessible to Israeli and Palestinians. We hereby submit this legislation to the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and Hamas. We bestow upon them a veto power, which may be exercised in the next 60 days.
Okay, so this legislation does have a veto power. Does anyone have any questions regarding this legislation?
Angela has her hand up.
Yeah,
okay.
Joseph, I just prefer to take out wind power and leave it as solar farms and green energy. It's kind of problematic, especially with the landscapes there.
Okay, that's not a question. That's you want to amend the legislation.
Sorry, you're right.
Are there any questions regarding this?
Yeah, I have another question. Yeah. You say IPC management. What does that entail? Will IPC have a implementation arm, economic company? What will the IPC have?
The IPC will have, it has a government. It will have a budget. It will receive funds from all over the world, and it will have a mutual police force. You did not choose to bring that legislation, but that will be part of the legislation, and it will work in coordination with the Israeli and the Palestinian governments.
Okay, and the location of this economic zone?
It will be between Israel and Gaza, near the sea. Both sides will have to allocate equal area, and it will be managed by the IPC, by our personnel. I'm the president. It will be managed by me and the vice president and our police force and our ministers, and it will allow the Palestinians and the Israelis to enter and to use the airport and the seaport and all the other facilities.
Okay.
Okay, let's have a vote. Palestinian parliament members, do we have any Palestinian parliament members who oppose this legislation? Do we have any Israeli parliament member who oppose this legislation? Okay, let's go to the Hamas leader. Hamas leader, are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I think it's a good approach.
Okay, let's go to the PA leader. Are you going to veto this legislation?
No, I'm not.
Let's go to the Israeli Prime Minister. Are you going to veto this legislation?
Yes.
Is there any changes that we can make? Can we amend this legislation?
Yes. Remove the sentence that says exclusive IPC management and control.
Okay, so if it
First
says,
of all, we are not setting up a dictatorship here. This is
okay. I understand. So if we change it to mutual,
no, it'll be run management of businesses is run by business people, by free enterprise. It's not controlled by the government. And that whole line has to leave, period.
Well, Ben Gurion Airport is managed by your government. The seaports in Israel are managed by your government. Why are you...
Actually, the seaport in Haifa now is managed by China. So
no, it's not managed by China.
Anyway,
it's a subcontractor.
Okay.
But are you saying that you relinquished control of Haifa Airport to the Chinese?
I'm not.
Is that what you're saying?
No, they had a massive contract to manage the port.
Okay.
That's
so
what they
that
did.
actually support what we are asking for.
No, you're not. You're saying you want IPC management, which means government. I say
Okay.
less government, not more government.
Okay.
I'm happy with this. There are joint economic zones now. I love all that stuff. That stuff is important because the Palestinian Authority and Hamas have done nothing to provide an economic base.
Okay, this is not an opportunity to
No, it's an indication of why I agree with it. It gives the Palestinians place for employment and place to develop their own businesses. But
all right, let me ask you this. If we say mutual.
No, it's not a government function. This is going to be
so
run by the private sector.
You are against a joint economic zone.
No, I support them 100%. And there are joint economic zones now.
You're against the IPC managing it.
That's right.
You are opposed to mutual.
I would be against.
Wait, you are opposed to mutual management of it.
I am opposed to government management of it. I'd be opposed to Israeli management.
Okay, so look, I am the president. I was elected, and I'm going to see to it that you will pay a price. That you
go right ahead.
That your coalition will fall, and you will not because you are the enemy of peace.
Yeah, I'm glad you think that, Joseph.
Well, I think you are the enemy of peace. I think you are the enemy of peace, and I'll tell you why. Because we have 2 million Palestinians. We have constant fighting and violence, and this would remove the fighting and the violence. And you, quite frankly, you don't really care about your own people.
This has nothing to do with fighting and violence.
Okay.
This has to do
I'm not going to argue with you. I think we demonstrated.
This is for building an economy.
Okay.
And it's not.
Let's go to the next. Questions.
There are some hands up.
Okay. Any questions?
John,
what is your question?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Naftali why he's participating in this experiment, political experiment, because his attitude is totally negative.
What is your question, please?
I'm asking Naftali why he's participating in this political experiment.
I think he means Len Bennett. Len Bennett.
I think he means Len Bennett.
Right? Yeah, of course. I mean,
I'm asking about, look, this is not a question about the legislation. Any questions about the legislation? We don't want to have a back and forth discussion about personalities here. Any questions about the legislation? We already voted, so let's go to the next one. Angela, please ask the question.
Yeah, I just have a question about the legislation in as much as if you're a dual nationality Israeli, you have to give up one of the nationalities to go into the Knesset. And therefore, I think if we're talking about legislation here, we should have some form of knowing who is sitting where, because this impacts Israelis and Palestinians.
What is your question about this legislation?
Can we please know where Len is sitting? Because that seems to be disrupting quite a bit our discussions.
I am the president. I am the prime minister of Israel. I have vetoed this legislation. This legislation is not going forward in its current
my question is, where are you sitting? Where are you right now? Maybe you're on a kibbutz. I have no idea.
Well, that's not really a question. No, this is a personal. I don't want to get into a personal dispute. Okay. We have to demonstrate how the simulation, how the common government will work. We're not here.
Joseph.
You have a question about the legislation.
John?
I don't want to.
Well, I have a question. Joseph, why can't we, when you say exclusive IPC management control, why don't you say that there'll be a contract given to a private company and the contract is administered by the IPC and the local governments? And that's it. Then you still have the business.
No, because we are the government. We don't choose to give a contract to someone else. We are the government. We want to make peace. Our people are the people in Gaza, the West Bank, and we are not there to hide our intentions or to play games. We are.
No, but I think I'm sorry. I think you misunderstand. Like I'm in France, okay? The French government owns even private companies, or it makes contracts with private companies.
That's after they built the airport and they found it more economical, okay? We are here, first of all, purpose is to make peace. Is not to.
I agree, but okay, why couldn't you give a contract?
It more efficient. It's not to make it more efficient. It's to make peace, okay?
But if you have private enterprise building the infrastructure on, let's say, on the 20, 30-year thing, I think it would be better.
This is really a technical argument.
No, Joseph, this is not technical. I'm sorry.
Okay.
This is not technical.
I don't have any more questions answered for you. Zohar, do you have any questions?
Well, I want to know, would Len agree to this? Would you agree to this?
I just want to take out the line.
Len is not really the prime minister.
Yes, I am.
No, he is. He's the prime minister of Israel.
We are here to demonstrate. It's not.
Listen, I've been in the West Bank. I've been in Gaza. I was there before there were walls, before there was the Palestinian Authority, before there was Yasser Arafat.
Okay, look, we need to move forward. We need to move forward.
Okay.
Zohar, you have questions. No, I'm sorry.
At this point,
you have a question.
There is no.
You have to respect the process, Lynn.
I am respecting
it. Yeah, but you have to respect the process,
Joseph. You guys need to respect the process.
Joseph, you must respect the process yourself. If Len is the prime minister, respect him. You cannot say he's not the prime minister.
He already vetoed it. I'm not here to convince him. I'm here to demonstrate how the process will work. Okay.
Are you saying, Joseph, that there will not be negotiation between the governments?
I am not saying that at all. Okay.
So that's what the simulation is all about. You're trying to show, it's not show of force.
Actually, you're right.
It's politics.
You're right.
It's politics, Joseph.
You are right. You are right.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree with you. I agree. You're right. But we don't really have time. You know, the process is going to be a lot more involved, okay? We cannot exhaust the process here. People have to use their imagination, okay? We have force legislation. So if we deal with one and we have the World Bank and we have other leaders, and the process is going to be a lot more involved in reality, okay? I agree with you, but we cannot exhaust the process in this simulation, okay?
So Joseph, can we maybe at a future simulation focus on, instead of like many laws, but which don't go through the process, focus on just one law and go in details in the process? Because that will be very useful.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Joseph, yeah, why don't we stop here? Don't do 4, do 3, and discuss in more depth. So you have half an hour more.
More in depth this legislation, or go to
in the discussion.
Yeah, that's
well. There's 3 laws and the discussion about them, and I think many of them are the same kind of direction of more integration.
All right.
I think Disneyland
okay,
can
so
stay.
let's have the post-simulation survey. Dan, can we do the post-simulation survey, or is that also?
Polling is not working at this time.
Interesting. Maybe I got it stuck. Never seen that before. Okay. Nevertheless, I just want to, a lot of the questions is how do we get from here to there? And I just want to point out that the Me Too movement was really started by one person, Tarana Burke. She single-handedly changed the world with the Me Too movement. And I believe that it is possible to have she was able to get an article in the New Yorker magazine that spread worldwide and changed the world. And we can have our group change the world together, similar to the Me Too movement. And one other thing that I am asking is, what can you do to help is participate in a write-in campaign to Thomas Friedman of the New York Times.
Joseph, your PowerPoint's frozen.
My PowerPoint is frozen? Okay, we're going to end this then. Let's go to, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And then we'll go to a discussion because there's no point if the PowerPoint is frozen. I don't know how to unfreeze it. So let's go to Oren, and then Oren, now you can make your comments, whatever you want to make, and people will ask you questions.
Okay, I'm glad that the legislation passed, and I'm glad about as I said, the direction of creating a confederation, which it might take a while, but in our movement, A Land for All, which I invite you all to visit our website, English, Hebrew, Arabic. We have a Facebook page, quite active. We are the only joint Palestinian Jewish, you even have a poster. Zohar has a poster from the demonstration that we go 2 or 3 times a week. And one of our slogans is מהירדן עד הים, דמוקרטיה לכולם. That's what he just showed. We also have an English version, from the Jordan to the sea, we all demand democracy. So it rhymes, it's also in Arabic. But more to the point is that we have a model that looks at confederation slightly differently. Is the 2 people that have the right of self-determination, and people here quoted that beforehand by the UN decision 181 that is still valid today, by the way. It's one of the only decisions that the Israeli government and the Palestinian government ratified. The Palestinian government ratified it 41 years later. But nonetheless, on the books, both Israeli government and Palestinian government ratified decision 181, which, as you know, it was 2 states with an economic union. And this is why I'm glad that Joseph chose that legislation about the economic zone, because it's in the spirit of one economy, 2 states. This is separating the political and the economic in order to resolve the conflict. And while, of course, many things have changed and Israel has thoroughly Judaized and controlled and oppressed Palestine and the Palestinian people, the logic of this decision still is valid. That is 2 nations who see themselves as belonging to the same homeland. And this is why I chose this slide behind me. Have a look. This is just 1 week ago during the Ramadan, we went to Bab el Amud, which is English. What is it called in English? The Shah
Damascus Gate.
Damascus Gate. And they have all these souvenirs shop there. And we found in a souvenir shop, look at it, exactly, these are magnets that you put on the fridge. Same, identical. One says Palestine, one says Israel, right? Oh, both of them, by the way, made in China. So in that respect, the imagination of the 2 people is that homeland. And also the geography is quite mixed. But the Jews control the Palestinians. It's very uneven. So we think in order to actually make a peace, we need to respect the fact that there are two nations, respect the fact that they look at the homeland as their own, and find political arrangements that will correspond with this reality and move us to the future. And then confederation, from all the possibilities that exist, is far better than the division into two segregated and fortified states, as the moment with the separation wall and with the closed borders, because we see from anywhere in the world, India, Pakistan, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, that those kind of divisions at best are just short-term solutions, and in the long run, they create hostility between the people. And this is why I like those legislation of economic zone and putting down the wall, because what we can see is that when the land opens up, terrorism subsides, people have much more common interests. And for that, it's not enough just to have Israel and Palestine as open states, which we believe in, but also to have common institutions, some kind of joint management. So we agree with what the idea that Joseph has about election to a body. You might rightly not say above, but a parallel management that will be able to govern aspects that the two nations allow that to happen. And this is why we differ here on the process. We think that this kind of common government or common governance has to be accepted by the two governments or by the two nations. And this is when you create a win-win situation, because obviously at the moment, the Palestinians lose out, but also the Jews, and I'm saying, intentionally I'm saying Jews and not Israelis, the Jews actually benefit, but they're also very insecure. Because in a colonial situation like we have, the colonizer feels insecure because they know it's not legitimate. When Bezalel Smotrich, our finance minister, very powerful person, 2 weeks ago said there are no Palestinian people, he knows that he's lying. This is just a theater of power. So when the two nations would recognize one another, which is partly happened already, but not fully, they will need some common institution that will make these two nations able to relax to some extent and know that they have joint institutions that govern the economy, that govern the environment, that govern immigration, that govern most of the things that are not to do with identity, with the core of the conflict, but with the management of the space. So in that respect, we do go through these governments, unlike your proposal. We do think it's possible. We do think that most Jews and most Israelis are very interested in the heart in peace, and we can see it in all the surveys. Many Palestinians too, but not peace that is imposed on them to have a ghetto state, but peace that allows them freedom of movement, that allow Jerusalem to be the capital of two states, and with open access and with economic development, environmental development, jobs, education, culture, that to some extent will be managed by the two people, inequality. So in that respect, we very much think of the European model, perhaps, that had endless wars between countries, hundreds of years of wars, and they resolved, and Europe became the region of peace through confederation. Each nation, Germany and France, for example, that took for 200 years, just slaughtered one another, now have open movement, joint government, joint institution, something that was unfathomable just 80 years ago. So think about that as a blueprint for other places around the world too, of mixed geographies, of heavy, protracted conflict that cannot be resolved in division, in partition. At the same time, it cannot be resolved, as some Palestinians still believe, or PLO believe for many years, as one secular state. Because one secular state too will mean for the Jews and for the Palestinians that their right for national self-determination is sacrificed, disappears. And this is why I stressed before international law, because international law recognizes that every nation has the right for self-determination. Of course, at the moment, the Jews have it and the Palestinians don't have it, but it has to be both. And at the same time, as the maps behind me show, division is impossible. So one state would be impossible because each nation wants to control its fate. Two states are impossible because division just will create conflict, and we failed to do it for 75 years. So confederation, like some other good examples around the world, which happened after long conflict, is the way to go. So the principles of it is two states with full sovereignty, but they allow one another open movement. They create joint government in certain areas that they agree on. It's not imposed on them. They agree on, and maybe there will be online election, which is a very nice idea. But nonetheless, they will allocate those power to the institutions, and will whether they have veto power or not veto power, it depends on the topic. Of course, in core issues of identity, history, representation, symbols, they will have a veto power. But in many other aspects, they will not have veto power because they allocated the power to the confederation. There will be a flag, which is really quite important. We see now in the last few months in Israel how the demonstration, amazing demonstration, by the way, anybody that comes to Israel should join this demonstration. It's unprecedented, the mobilization of civil society for democracy, first time in Israel's history. But the flag is very, very important because people are rallying by the flag. So we should invent a flag like Germany and France have a flag, but there is a European flag as well. So we should design a flag that will unite also Jews and Palestinians on a higher level, more of a management level, economic level, legal level, less on the identity level. And one other point is that all people that are suffered and been injured economically, geographically, victims of the war will be compensated, all of them. There will be reparation, there will be return, there will be, for both Jews and Palestinians, the injuries of the war will be corrected, but with one caveat, that correcting past injustice cannot create new injustice. And this is very important for the land issue because a lot of Jews live on Palestinian land. And while, of course, in the West Bank, it's a total, it's illegal by international law, and it's a war crime. But inside Israel, it's sort of legal. But nonetheless, some of this land in Tel Aviv, in Haifa, in Rehovot, in Ashdod, in Beersheba, was previously Palestinian land. So the Palestinian would have the right, either economically or to get land, but not to displace the Jew who in good faith got a land there from the government. They didn't steal the land, the government gave it to them. So we have to think about reparation from the war. It's very important for reconciliation, but in a sensitive way that people that in good faith have possession will not be suffering. And finally, international law, I stressed that 2 or 3 times. Confederation is the furthest away that we can stretch international law, but still to be within the confines of international law and get full international support. One state that many people, many good people, liberal people, democratic people support one state, this is beyond international law. This will not get international legitimacy because one state will do away with Israel and will do away with Palestine. And these two states have the right to exist. And no state in the UN era since 1945 has disappeared. There are only 3 cases of unifications: East and West Germany, North and South Vietnam, etc. So no state has disappeared. And I would say that the people of Israel and of Palestine, many of them would want to have the self-determination. So we have to be within the limit of international law that gives those rights, and still having a solution where the land is shared, there is freedom of movement, there is rights for both people, there's some common institution and self-determination for each nation. So I encourage the Confederation idea very much. We want to collaborate with IPC and find a way forward to have this idea of 2 governments and a third overarching connection of the people to a democratic and peaceful future. So in that respect, I'm very glad that you people passed the 3 legislations. The wall must fall. The wall is a total obstacle for peace. And of course, so is terrorism. So as you know, I put that caveat that the terrorist groups will have to be disarmed. Mostly the Hamas, but also the Jewish settlers are armed to the teeth, and they are also very much a danger to Palestinians. And then the common economic zone could be stretched for the whole country, not just to Gaza, between Ashkelon and Gaza. It could be stretched for the whole country. It will be a joint economy. People can travel from Hebron to Beersheba. In fact, just outside my window here, there's a house that is being renovated, and all the workers come from Daharia, from Hebron every day. Why not? Commute to work. It's only 40 minutes, even 35 minutes. So the whole country should be the economy, and that will be a glue that will prevent future wars. But again, it's very sensitive. At the moment, the Jews have the control. It's very, very difficult to take control, resources, and domination from people. But since at the moment there is no peace and there's no stability, I think that confederation is the way forward, also to allow Palestinian self-determination, also to Jews to give up some of the militarized power that actually gives us no security in the long term. So thank you for your participation, and I hope we collaborate.
Oren, can you take some questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, let's start with Shlomo, then John, and then Zohar. Shlomo.
So yeah, I'm just a little confused. You mentioned two states. So are you talking about two states that are overlapping each other? What exactly you mean by two states?
Okay, good question. I didn't clarify that enough. We are, as we said, we stretch international law the furthest we can. So we take the international law, the recognized international border, which is the green line. This started as an armistice line, and it became recognized. The decision, for example, in 2004 about the wall must fall, recognizes the green line as an international border, and other decisions too, since 1967. So we say the borders will stay, but the functioning of the border will change dramatically. Just like the border between Italy and France, or whatever, between Germany and Poland. I mean, Germany and Poland is incredible legacy of tens of millions of refugees. So the borders between them stayed, but the functioning of the border changed, and people can go back to Poland if they came from Prussia or whatever, and Poles can come to Germany to work. So think about not to touch the borders, because that's too destructive. I draw your attention to the deal of the century. Remember that 2 or 3 years ago? The failed plan by Donald Trump. It was peace with the absence of Palestinians, but they offered all kinds of border changes, and especially when Palestinians in Israel will be annexed to Palestine, small fragmented Palestinian state. That's disaster. The minute you start moving borders, it usually is racist, and it usually just gives another layer to the conflict. So thanks for your question. We look at two states, that is two sovereign areas. In West Bank and Gaza, there will be Palestinian law. In Israel, there will be Israeli law, with freedom of movement between them, that will allow people to integrate economically, but yet to have their self-determination in legal system, institutional system within their territories.
All right. Now we are going to...
I have a question.
Wait. We have an order. John, Zohar, Libby, Len, Nasir, and Troy.
Okay. Hi, Oren. One of the major issues on this particular situation is the Palestinian refugees. Now, you did mention reparations, but for many Palestinian refugees, they would reject that, because given their status in various Arab countries in which they exist, reparations would be insufficient. But if it was a case of bringing Palestinians back to the Holy Land, where do you envisage those millions of Palestinians, where would they be situated?
Well, excellent question again. I mean, we discuss it a lot. Don't forget, we are Palestinian Jewish movements. Of course, the right of return, Hak el-Auda, is very important for the Palestinians. We support the Hak el-Auda, the right of return. It's essential for reconciliation. And it's also essential on the humanitarian ground. People that are driven out should find a place according to all the conventions that also Israel is signed. At the time, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Israel still signed all the international convention. Now it refuses to do that. But our right of return is not complete in that respect, because this is also where the Confederation offers a solution that is, I think, more acceptable for many Israelis. That is, the right of return, like accepted around the world, will be to the states. So the Poles refugees return to Poland, and the German refugees return to Germany, et cetera, around the world. So they return and get Palestinian citizenship, and then they also have freedom of movement. So a Palestinian refugee that returns to El Khalil or to Nablus, get the Palestinian citizenship, they can come and work and maybe rent a place in Beersheba. So it's a right of return, which is perhaps not exactly what many Palestinians or some Palestinians imagine, but it's much, much more than is offered by any other solution. And of course, taking account of the situation that has developed in Israel west of the Green Line too. But it allows Palestinian return, and it allows them even to go back to where they come from. But the citizenship will be Palestinian and Israelis. Also, if they do live in Israel, they will not be a part of the party politics. So that allays the fear of many Israelis that they will be washed by Palestinian becoming a majority. No, the Israelis will have more or less the same demography. Palestine will also have the same demography and freedom of movement. By the way, Jews, and that's not a marginal point, Jews will be allowed to live in Palestine too. And many of them would want to, under conditions of peace. It's many of the holy places. And also there will be economic opportunities. Usually when the more powerful, like think about West Germany and East Germany. Many West Germans moved to East Germany because there was economic opportunities. Everything was cheaper, you could develop it, etc. So we also see positive under, of course, Palestinian sovereignty, accepting Palestinian law, that will be Jews and Israelis living in Palestine. And so this is, and the idea of reparation, of course, there had to be a committee, like most other places, decide what is the value, allowing people in sufficient resources. I mean, Palestinians have been, let's remember that fact that in 1947, Palestinians and Jews had about the same level of economic development. And at the moment, Israel is 20 times richer than Palestine. So this gap has to be closed. So the reparation also has to allow a more peaceful or to narrow the economic gaps that were caused by Israel's superior power and violent dispossession of the Palestinians. In order to have reconciliation, you have to have reparations as well.
All right, let's go to Zohar. Zohar.
Thank you, Joseph. And first of all, thank you, Oren, for joining us on this simulation and activity. I was looking forward to get a chance to speak to someone from Eretz Lekulam. I personally, a part of my, well, not so frequent participation in this type of simulation. I'm also part of the Federation movement together with Emmanuel Shachaf and other folks, in case you've heard of them before. And if not, maybe we can get in touch later and try to see maybe we can join forces. Now, regarding one of the comments that you made about international law and how the two-state solution is recognized by international law, when the one state is not, and Confederacy is stretching it as much as possible. Just on a few points there. One, the legitimacy of the United Nations at the time of the 1947 that included not more than 65 members who voted how the rest of the world is going to look like and where will the borders cross is highly disputed. With that in mind, I struggle a little bit with the notion of national self-determination when I consider how two countries or two states will have no borders and free movement between the two, but there not going to be any inequality when it comes to rights between the two citizens of Israel and Palestine. Will Israel as a separate states maintain the right to put on oppressive, discriminatory laws against non-Jews, as currently practiced and documented by Adalah and other human rights organizations. Because if we are trying to establish an open border, but a different type of governance system that prioritizes some people over another, it's just a different form of, well, lack of a better word, apartheid. So I struggle with the notion of how do we make sure that everyone has absolutely equal rights in Israel, Palestine, when you're talking about two separate states. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Zohar. In terms of the borders and the way they were created and they're hotly contested, I would take issue with you. I think it's an absolute norm of international law and international politics, for good or for bad, and quite often for bad, the way borders were determined, of course, mostly by colonial powers, but they are almost sacred in international politics, almost sacred, almost like religion. Sometimes it's ridiculous, but it is. You see, for example, what happened to Russia. They invaded a small part of Ukraine, like my Russian friends say to me all the time. We're taking some muddy land in Ukraine with some unknown towns, and we received sanctions from the rest of the world because we impinge on the territorial integrity of the Ukraine, and you can see all the decisions about it. Territorial integrity means that those borders, in that respect, created by the Soviet Union, by Nikita Khrushchev, now they are sacred. The whole world rallies against Russia when it invades the Ukraine. And the same with Turkey and Cyprus and Morocco and West Sahara and other places. So it's not hotly contested. It's the norm. And it's the way the borders are managed that maybe is hotly contested. But the way where the borders are, there's no serious force in the world is to try to challenge that. And of course, in our little Israel-Palestine, the convoluted borders, they happen to be the end of the 48 war, sometimes quite accidental. But nonetheless, in order to stabilize the situation, I think, or we think, you should recognize these borders and just manage them in a positive way. In terms of inequality,
just a rebuttal, if I may, for a second. In 1948, there were 65 members of the United Nations. Right now, there are 192. So I don't know what borders were sacred that this sanctuary has been trampled upon for years.
Well, there's of course, there is a development, but of course, every country that joins the UN, and you know that as well as me, ratifies all the previous decisions, and the previous decision can only be overruled by a new decision, whether it's the General Assembly or Security Council. Of course, there are different levels, but the fact that there are more countries in the UN now doesn't disvalidate. Is that how you say it in English? Doesn't rescind the previous decisions, as long as they're not replaced. And 181 hasn't been replaced. Its geographies is replaced, but not the content of it. Its geography is now the green line that Israel benefited 21% of the territory in 1948. So let's not also forget the fact that Arab countries also invaded Palestine, Jordan and Egypt in the beginning, and they took part of Palestine, and then they allowed the Palestinians, now they support the Palestinians. So there is a history to it, but the fact that there's more countries in the UN, unless they make another decision about Israel-Palestine, it's still the logic of the two nations. But as I said, we want to stretch it further. We don't believe the two separate states will resolve the conflict. The opposite, like India or Pakistan or Northern Ireland or whatever, they could actually aggravate the conflict. So let's be smart about it. And let's look like the maps behind me, the attachment of Palestinians say all the time, you know, Nablus and El Khalil and Quds, Akka and Haifa, because they're connected in the imagination to the whole country, and the same with Jews. So in that kind of relatively rare overlapping of two nations in terms of the homeland, there must be a confederation. Now you talk about federation, a confederation could lead to federation later on. It could, and it could actually be positive, but at the moment it has to be after the fulfillment of the self-determination of the two nations. There has to be an order to it, like Rajesh Hadi, the great Palestinian author, once told us in B'Tselem, he was the head of El-Haq and I was the head of B'Tselem. He said, we need our sovereignty for just a short period and then we move forward. But without getting our sovereignty, we will not move forward. So federation has to come after confederation, if at all, if the two states choose to confederate and then federate. Now, the economic issue, I think that's already in a different level. It's not in a level of legality, but in the level of wise politics. You want every wise government that wants stability and they want movement and prosperity. They need to work hard on alleviating or closing the gaps between the poor and the rich. And you can see in the United States how destabilizing and how conflict-riddled is in enormous gaps in the United States between the rich and the poor. And when it adds to it that most of the poor are blacks or Mexicans or Hispanics and most of the wealthy are white, there is also a racial element to this kind of conflict, and the same in Israel-Palestine. So this is up to the two governments to try and inject development, have incentives, create new infrastructure in the West Bank and Gaza that have been neglected, that have been destroyed by violence. And I think the economic potential is immense. Just think about the meeting point of West and East. Think about Israel as the hub of 2 billion Christians and 1.5 billion Muslims as just pilgrimage and religious tourism. Think about the beauty of the country that has coastal areas, has desert, it has snowy mountains. Just think about how economic development could be incredible in Israel-Palestine if the conflict is resolved.
All right, let's go to Libby and then Len and then Nasir and then Troy and then Sean.
Thanks, Oren, very much. And I'd like to just pick up quickly on something you just said, which I think is very, very important to whatever form we choose to resolve this incredible lack of relationship. And that is, it feels like for any peace process to work, it's ultimately in the hands of the people. The governments can make rules and laws and regulations, but if the people don't feel trusting, and if the people don't feel that they are one with their neighbors and have trust in their neighbors, it's going to be very difficult for any new government or any government to be successful. And we're experiencing that today. And so I was wondering if in your A Land for All, there's a process of bringing citizens together in relationship building activities. So there's a beginning of this trust forming between the citizens of all walks of life, all the different religions and groups. And as you said, that's so needed here right in the United States. It's something that we all need to be aware of about creating a community and an environment where everybody's needs are met and everybody feels included and appreciated. And I think it takes a lot of face-to-face relationship building. And I wonder if that's part of your program.
Well, another good point. I mean, don't forget that we are a voluntary organization with maybe 800 members, and I hope many of you want to join us from overseas too. I think we have a branch in New York as well. You can actually find out. So our power is limited, but very much in our documents, you'll find, Libby, you are right, we find to learn from the mistakes of the Oslo Agreement, for example, that was totally elitist. It didn't involve the people. Of course, it was also encountered by terrorism and by settlers and the assassination of Rabin, etc. But to learn the lesson from it, and it will always be contested, but you have to very much involve the community to build it up, to have it as a gradual process. You'll find that we talk about reconciliation in culture, we talk about education, we talk about meetings. We have actually do that quite a lot. We have conferences, we have meetings, we have events. Now, for example, in the big protest, you should follow, for example, in Haaretz, a Palestinian, Thabit Aburas, and myself just published an article. I don't know if it was translated to English, but in Hebrew, just a week ago, about the need to form some of the protests for democracy as explicitly joined Arab Jewish, because at the moment the protest is almost purely Jewish. And that means the Arab citizens and the Palestinians look at it as the war between the Jews, but no, it's a war between democracy and apartheid, basically. So, you know, the settlers that push up these legal so-called reforms, they want to entrench Jewish supremacy in the whole land between the Jordan and the sea. This is why they have to move away the judiciary power, because the judiciary that still believes in equality, etc., is an obstacle. This is my interpretation. You look at it from that perspective and see what you think. But in that respect, building the protests now as Arab Jewish is exactly what you say, Lipi. This is creating a process of joint interest, mutual agreement, and even slogans together in order to have a process whereby you build a joint struggle for peace. And it's happening now in the street. I mean, yesterday there were some speakers in Beersheba, in Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem that spoke about that for the first time really after 3 months of demonstrations. But that goes way beyond that, of course, in terms of schools meeting one another. And there is another great organization now of women. The women protest, you know, the women protest is very much Arab Jewish too. You know, the women that dress in red everywhere. So especially in the north, in the Galilee and in Haifa, I know that, I know because my sister is part of it.
One second, Joseph, can you please?
Someone is Ahmad Shalabi.
Ahmed Shalabi, please mute.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I would say, Joseph, I would say that, you know, we a bit past the time and I haven't had dinner yet and my lovely partner is also hungry. So let's have just quick questions to round it off.
Okay, I just
take
want
them
to tell
together.
you, Aaron, Oren, unfortunately, you keep saying apartheid, which if you come to Canada, the government of Canada will call you a racist because that's considered anti-Semitic and they accept the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism.
This is total nonsense. Total nonsense.
That's not a question.
Please ask Oren question.
Okay. I am telling you,
let me respond
I become more discouraged as I hear everybody on this screen being left-wing and anti-Israel. And I have a couple, okay, I'll ask you a few questions. You want to talk of reparations? There are 1 million Jews that got thrown out of Arab lands that were taken in with Israel. Are you giving them reparations? In UN 181, which was not legal under Article 80 of the UN Charter, the Zionists accepted to share the land. The Arabs did not. They launched the Nakba. Their refugees are on their heads. And there is no law that says when you start a war of aggression, that you have the right, when you lose, to go back and take everything over. So I just want to talk about that. And I would like to ask you a question about Beit Tselem. I know the Beit Tselem.
I have to answer that, Len. Do you want me to answer? Because it will be too long, right? Firstly, I totally support the reparation of Jewish refugees. And I've written a lot about the fact that Israel is actually a country of refugees as well. So they got housing, they got land, but they should be compensated for what the position that they, Iraq and Egypt and other countries compensate for them, absolutely. But this is not a Palestinian issue. Let's not confuse it. This is Israel, Iraq, Israel, Morocco, Israel, Egypt, and it should be a reconciliation in the Middle East. Okay, so this is one thing. The other thing about the 181, the Palestinians rejected it, or there wasn't very much a Palestinian, if you know the history, the Palestinian leadership was all overseas. It was broken by the British in the Great Rebellion, but nonetheless, the Mufti rejected it, the Arab League rejected it, the Zionist movement smartly accepted it, but that's not the end of history. In 1988, the Palestinians accepted it. So you have to look at the change that happened to the Palestinians, and they've accepted it. Whether it's binding or not binding, there's a very big discussion among the legal experts.
Why didn't they accept the 1967 offer of everything in the West Bank and Gaza becoming Palestinian just for the sake of peace? The Arabs said no.
This is a lie. Israel did not accept it. The Palestinians always accepted it.
You don't know what you're talking about.
I know very well. I was there.
Yeah, so as well. I was in Israel.
Let's not get bogged down in history, because the fact of the matter, Israel controls the whole territories in 1967.
Of course it does, because it's theirs. It's theirs by international law.
Please ask.
No, it's not there by international law. Let me make that absolutely clear. It's not there. International law, as we said, any decision is preceded by another decision. The later one applies.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's part of a charter. You cannot override
we need to move on. We need to move on.
Part of what charter? The UN Security Council.
You cannot change what was promised to Jews.
Okay.
The UN.
Let's go to Sean.
One last sentence, that everybody's clear. The UN Security Council decision 2334 led, you got it into the lion's den here, because I'm an expert on that. It's declared again just about 5 years ago, exactly, that Palestinian territory should, in fact, they call it Palestinian territory, not territories, just to make sure that Gaza and the West Bank are one territory that is applied to Palestinian sovereignty. Everything that Israel does beyond that, including Jerusalem, is illegal. Let's be clear about that. There were previous decisions that you can interpret as you want. This is how it stands at the moment.
Okay, let's go to Sean.
Wait, Susan, I think I'm before. I'm on the line before Sean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read my list. Sorry.
Troy.
Sorry.
Nasir, Troy.
I want Oren to have dinner, so I'm gonna not ask a question.
Okay.
Okay, Oren, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I want everybody to say, first of all, I'd like to interact with you separately, but I want everybody to say that I live in the place where you said we have to take example. We have to take example on the European Union. And what do you think that it would be a good idea to study more how it actually happened? I happen to live in Alsace, which is where we made peace between France and Germany after 1,000 years of killing each other. I think everybody knows this. But you guys do not know how the peace happened. You just know we had 1,000 years of war, but you're not looking at how the peace happened, which is, for me, crazy. You should look at how the peace happened in practice. We have a European Parliament here. It is the only parliament in the world which is like the IPC parliament wants to be. It's directly elected. So really, you have to look at history, and you have to look, and I invite even people to have maybe a trip here, a study trip, where I will show you will visit the European Parliament, the Court of Human Rights. You'll visit the Council of Europe. You'll see institutions which create peace. What do you think of that?
Well, first of all, I very much agree. We need to learn from the good examples and for the failures. It's absolutely right. Secondly, Troy, you underestimate us. We had about 3 trips already. I've been twice to the European Union. There was a delegation. We addressed the European Parliament. You can actually find it. Just, Amanda, when was it that I was in Brussels? Just about 2 months ago, I was in Brussels again. I met the Brussels Parliament. By the way, that's very important that the city of Jerusalem, we very much think the model of Brussels is a very good example with the Flemish and the Walloons, and it's a joint capital that is capital of the 2 sub-nations of Belgium. Belgium is also becoming a confederation. We'd love to come to Alsace-Lorraine. Absolutely, I think we can learn from the French and the Germans. Let's try and organize it, Troy. We'd like to have a delegation to learn also from there. We traveled in certain places in Europe. We've been several times in the European Parliament. We have some support by European politicians, but not enough. Not enough, because the European politicians, let me put that also in, are cowards. Europe actually created the tragedy of Palestine. Europe created the tragedy of the Jews, especially the Germans and the British. And they've done nothing. They've done nothing to try and achieve peace here. They've done very well in Europe itself. We can learn from it. but let's mobilize the Europeans that are directly responsible for the Holocaust and directly responsible for the escape of Jews from Europe. They're directly responsible for the carving, the callous carving of Israel, Palestine by the British that already knew from Ireland and they already knew from India. They already knew that this is a disaster and they just escaped and left Palestinians and Jews here to fight a bloody civil war. Let's have Britain and Germany and other countries with a lot of power try to correct what the Americans and others tried and failed. And we are very, very happy to learn from what Europe did and take it a step forward.
All right.
I agree. Please answer
Let's go to Sean.
Message.
Let's go to
answer
Sean.
the direct message.
Hello.
Sean.
Hello.
Answer what?
Answer the direct message which I sent to you with your contact.
Well, I cannot, men are limited, unlike women. We cannot do too many things at once. So maybe Joseph can send me the chat afterwards in a file and I can read through it. I'm very happy to answer. You can reach me by email and other.
I'll forward you the chat. Sean.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a question for Mr. Oren. When you were telling us earlier about the one state and the two state, correct me on this. Are you mentioning that when you mention one state solution, does that mean there's still going to be two state solution, but it's going to be treated as one state, where Palestine, where each citizen, and you mentioned citizenship. Does that mean people in that region will have their citizenship, but it will be labeled Israel/Palestine? So, and a person living in Israel will have a citizenship. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think there will be an Israeli. What we suggest, and of course, don't forget that what we suggest is quite a loose template. It's not like your movement has very specific constitution and rules. We prefer to have a framework that people will fill it up with detail. But what we envisage is an Israeli citizenship, Palestinian citizenship, and people will be members of the union, Israel-Palestine Union, or maybe some people suggested to call it the Jerusalem state, which could be nice too, or Abraham state, Abrahamic state. So yeah, people will be, and with that document, you'll be able to go to the whole land, from Nablus to Tel Aviv, or from Haifa to Hebron, and then you'll get your rights, social rights and political rights within your state, a bit like in Belgium. We have Wallonia and Flandria, and you have overall Belgium politics, but also within each province, you have very important politics. And this is to Troy, just to tell you that in 2 weeks, we're gonna have here the previous premier of Wallonia. His name is Paul Magnet, and he's gonna come and talk to us also about making peace in Europe. And he's now a member of the European Parliament. So we're trying to learn where we can. Of course, we have limited budgets, etc. But Zahir, this is what we have in mind.
So your solution. So I'm sorry. So your solution is if they have citizenship all the same, that an Israeli can go to Palestine and work there, and a Palestinian can go to Israel and work there because they have almost like a dual citizenship. Like there's not just a separate, there's a dual in that region because they're free to move when they have dual citizenship. Like I can go anywhere. Is that true? Is that your solution?
Yeah, well, think about an Italian that has Italian citizenship and European citizenship. She can go to Germany to study. She can go to to unlimited time to France if she finds a job. She can go to a doctor in Austria, and yet she's an Italian national. So her full rights are in Italy, but she can live and travel and do many other things in other countries under the umbrella of a European citizenship. I think that's the model that we'd like to have. And in fact, we'd like to have it for the whole Middle East. But some people, mentioned that this shouldn't just be limited to Israel, Palestine. If we can think about the Middle East moving from the current sorry states of civil wars and conflict and states being in terrible crisis like Lebanon and Syria, let's not forget that the whole history almost of the Levant is a free area. My mother used to go in summers to Beirut and to holidays in Junia. It was open until 1948. So we think about confederation could be a model for further development of peace, inshallah, as we say.
And you think this this IPC movement is getting there, right?
Sorry?
And you think the IPC movement is getting to that approach?
Yeah, would like to have the development and confederation will start in Israel-Palestine, but will be enlarged. And people will see the benefits, the economic benefits and cultural benefits and benefits for the people to have the region open for them, for immigration, for development, for contacts. And Israel will, in that kind of scenario, totally prosper because Israel has technological knowledge, Israel has scientific knowledge, Israel has medicine, Israel has so many advantages. It doesn't just have to be military, many other advantages. Say like Singapore in Asia. Singapore was a poor country until the 1960s, 70s. It developed a lot of expertise, and now it's a hub of economic development. Everybody in Asia wants to get to Singapore. So I think Israel could be in the region, but then the region has to open up, yeah.
Israel.
Oren, do you have to leave?
Okay, my hand is up.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. Thank you, Oren.
Wait a second, I want to say something.
I just want to make a closing remarks. But Oren, you could leave if you wish. I don't want to keep you from eating.
Thank you, Oren.
Thank you, Oren. Bye-bye.
I want to thank you so much. I would like to make closing remarks. Hopefully,
No, he's looking in the PowerPoint.
Is the PowerPoint visible now?
Yeah. 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 Okay. How could you help?
We have press slides.
Okay. Just 1 second, please. Let me. Okay. So we are asking for you to participate in a write-in and call campaign. And we want to focus on certain individuals because I don't want to give you like a general idea, but specific individual. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, Tony Blair, his assistant contacted me several times. He seemed to be interested in joining our simulation. Gidon Levy, who participated in our simulation, and Ralph Nader. And this is what you could write, for instance, to Thomas Friedman. That's his email address, tfried@newyorktimes.com. That's his phone number. I wrote him many, many times. And you could write a letter such as, I participated in a peace simulation conducted by an organization called the Israeli-Palestinian Confederation. They invite speakers to stress test their formula for peace. Notable people such as Dennis Ross, Peter Beinart, Noam Chomsky, Alan Dershowitz, Cornel West, Gidon Levy, and Aaron David Miller were some of the few who spoke at these events and praised it. Noam Chomsky recorded a separate video endorsing the IPC as the most sensible way to make peace. The simulations are conducted twice a month on Zoom. I was very skeptical and joined the simulation out of curiosity. I must say that I was surprised. This organization has an intriguing approach to solving the conflict. I urge you to join one of the simulation and to provide coverage. Their website is ipconfederation.com, where you could sign up for one of their future events. So if we can send an email to him, also to Tony Blair, the email is a little different. I'm not gonna read it to you, but it's a little different. Also to Gidon Levy, and also to Ralph Nader. If we can get some movement from any of these individuals, that could help a lot. Also, if one of you is willing to record a video right now saying that you support that could help. If you are willing to state now that you are supporting the common, our proposal for peace, then we had last time, we had Zohar, and we're still working on the video. Our videographer, his wife was in the hospital, so we couldn't finish the video on that. But if you are willing to record a video right now supporting the IP Confederation or the common government, that would be helpful.
I might, but with some reservations, but I really like the idea, and I think we should collaborate and find, a confederation movement that is international.
Okay. So could you please state your name and say your support and why you support? That would be great. Go ahead.
What, you want to do it right now?
Yes, absolutely. Video out of it.
But this is
you want to do it? We can record in another time, but it is being recorded. We can use that recording.
Yeah, I prefer to sort of formulate to my text with some care, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I can do it.
2 or 3 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other? Okay. And then, so let me go to share the screen one more time. And to the PowerPoint. Again,
how is dinner going? This is my partner, getting very hungry.
Okay. So these are closing remarks. And that is, a common democratic government can bring peace. And online elections is feasible and can be held securely. Estonia, the country of Estonia, holds an election online with 9.5 million people. 1 day of war between Gaza and Israel is $100 million, sometimes even more. Same amount could easily create a common government. Let me just show you what $100 million can do. You can buy a Van Gogh portrait, you can buy an Airbus, and you can buy a mansion in Los Angeles for $100 million, or you can create an Israeli-Palestinian common government for the people of Israel and Palestine, which in my opinion is a lot more peaceful and a lot more productive. With that, I'm going to close unless some of you have any, Oren, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I'm very glad we connected, and let's try and find ways for the future to promote the Confederation idea.
Sure. Thank you. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Oren. Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.
Perfect session.
Thanks, Oren.
Thanks,
Thank
Joseph. Thanks, everybody else.
Bon appetit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Shalom.
Bye. Bye.